Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today for the session on clinical trials and regulatory pathways. I would like to begin by introducing our moderator for today, Dr. Shohini Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is a global executive MBA alumna and topper of the batch of 22 and had a long stint in pharma working at the R&D Center at Torrent Pharmaceuticals Limited before joining Ahmedabad University, where she is currently Director, Admission and Chief of Staff at the Office of the Vice Chancellor. Thank you so much for moderating the conversation today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mehak, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Clinical Trials and Regulatory Pathways. This topic is more relevant now than ever as the global pharmaceutical industry faces rapid innovation, tighter regulations, and increasing expectations for speed without compromising on safety and quality. With India poised to be a $300 billion market by 2030 and contributing more than 48% of the US FDA and ANDA approvals, regulatory compliance is no longer just a legal requirement, it's a strategic differentiator. So with this, please please join me in welcoming Dr. Kiran Marthak, Director Medical Affairs, Phase 1 and Regulatory Affairs at VIDA Private Limited. He has joined us today to speak on clinical trials and regulatory pathways. Thank you so much, Dr. Mathak, for giving us your valuable time for this session. Professor Mathak brings over 40 years of leadership in clinical research and regulatory affairs. He is currently Director of Medical Affairs, as I mentioned, at VIDA Clinical Research, where he also serves on the board of directors. His career includes key leadership roles at Ranbaxy, Pfizer, Lambda Therapeutic Research, and VIDA, where he has led global clinical development across all phases of trials, both in India and internationally. Importantly, Professor Marthak is also a core faculty member for the Global Executive MBA, the GEMBA program, for which we are conducting this webinar series at Ahmedabad University, which is a program designed for working professionals with 7 or more years of experience, where the average experience of a typical cohort is around 15 years. In the GEMBA program, Dr. Mathak mentors senior pharmaceutical professionals in clinical strategy and regulatory frameworks. And it was also my personal privilege to have been taught by him during my GEMBA tenure at Ahmedabad University. With his vast experience and academic insight, we are honored to have him share his perspective on clinical trials and the regulatory pathways that govern them today. So again, a very warm welcome, Dr. Marthak, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh. Thanks, Mahek, and thanks to Ahmedabad University for giving me an opportunity to give some idea about the regulatory side uh, to the audience as such. And I will concentrate essentially on the regulatory aspects more related to clinical trials and a little bit also on the manufacturing side, but not in that great detail because the time does not permit me to do so. So, with this, uh, uh, what we are going to do is you are going to have a look at the pharma regulatory aspect at 10,000 feet height. That means I'll be giving you a more of a knowledge which is more uh, on the upper level side and not going into too much details of it, which will probably take a one whole day to explain the NDCT rules. And the regulatory authorities in India is called CDSCO, Drugs Controller General of India. And you can understand by looking at this picture, and you'll be able to see that the pharma market in India, it was about $65 billion in 24, and it expected to actually double it up to in about next 6 years, that is $130 billion. And out of this $65 billion, at least 20% is export. At least 50% of it is exported, and it comprises of about 20% of the global export, but related to pharma market, and it's essentially because of there is an excellent pool of skilled professionals, cost-effective manufacturing, research capabilities, and the conducive regulatory scenario. And this market is comprising, if you look at the global generic market, earlier we saw the Indian generic market. In global generic market, the market grows at about 5% CAG. In 23, it was $424 billion, and by 2033, that is in about 10 years of time, it's going to be the nearly 60 to 70% hike. That is $691 billion. So that gives you an idea about worldwide what is the importance of the generic drug also, so far as the Indian pharma market is concerned. And this is essentially uh, related to the drugs which comprises the maximum sale is mainly related to cardiovascular system, central nervous system, oncology, and musculoskeletal disease, drugs related to these therapeutic areas. I'm sure you all know that as I talked earlier, that the India exports the products to market, to the various market, and the US is the biggest market so far as the generic products or the pharma market is concerned. And you must have heard recently, President Trump uh, putting 100% tariff on the pharma product coming from India, particularly those which are patented drugs. And so the, that shows the importance the Indian pharma commands, so far as US FDA is concerned. And at present, there is a lot of things going on so far as the export of the pharma products to USA. If we look at the ANDA stands for abbreviated new drug application, and that is essentially for the generic products which are being sold in the USA. And in 23, 733 ANDAs were submitted, and in 24, 740. And if we look at the ANDAs approved by the US FDA in 2019, it was 935. In 2020, 737, 21, 679, and 22, 740. So if you look, it's around 750 ANDAs are approved every year by the US FDA. And that's a very large volume of the products which are being approved, so that when the generic products come in the market, it becomes much more economical for the uh, public to purchase the products as such. And you can see that the India, out of this ANDAs which are approved, nearly 48% of these products are coming from India as such. So if you look at it in 2022, 740, as many as about 370 uh, products or the approval of ANDAs are from India. So India plays a very major role so far as the US pharma market is concerned. Now, coming to India as such, in India, the CDSCO is the National Regulatory Authority, and it evaluates the safety, efficacy, and the quality of the drugs available in the market. And they are also responsible, so far as the clinical trials are concerned, for the approval of the bioequivalence studies or bioavailability studies, clinical trials related to the small molecules, related to the large molecules, and also for the medical devices. The This particular chapter, where it is related to the pharma market, the biotech market, and also the medical device market, the is called New Drugs and Clinical Trial Rule 2019. It came into actions in March 2019, and this after this rules that they have come into action, there is a tremendous uprise in the number of studies that are being carried out in India, and number of products which are available in India is very compliant, and it's very in favorable condition to that of the pharma market as such, and the pharma companies. Before we go to this, you need to understand what is the a new API or a new drug, new chemical entity, when it is called as a new chemical entity, which is not significantly used in the country and not approved as safe and effective, that means it is a drug which is not available in India at all. There can be also, it's called as a new drug if there is an already approved drug available in the market, but we are now recommending for the additional indication or changing the route of administration or changing the dosage or even changing the dosage formulation. That means going from injectable to tablet or tablet to syrup or whatever we consider. So change of dose, change of dosage administration, change of route of administration, change of indication. All these studies come under a new drugs and clinical trial rule. Also, there can be a fixed dose combination. There is a two drugs already available in the market, but then one formulation is prepared in which both the drugs are available in the same formulation. So that comes as a fixed dose combination. Again, it is considered as a new drug. Or one is preparing the modified or a sustained release formulation where it is earlier available as immediate release formulation, but now it will be available as a modified release, sustained release, prolonged release formulation. And then the special categories, this is very important. Any biologics, that is the large molecules, anything which is made from the biologics as such, which includes vaccine, rDNA product, monoclonal antibodies, gene therapy, CAR T cells, stem cells, xenograft, all these, though the drug may be available in the market, but any other company wants to launch a similar product, it is considered as a new drug. So this is all product which comes under a new drug. So the chapter one is the essentially deals with clinical trials, BAB studies, ethics committee, and new drugs. Now, any study which is carried out in human beings always needs to have the ethics committee approval. Without the ethics committee approval, no study can be carried out, whether it is in the healthy subjects or in patients. Also, every ethics committee is governed by the regulatory authorities, and it needs to have the confirmed registration with the regulatory authorities, and the validity of the registration is for 5 years, and then after the 5 years they have to again re-register the ethics committee. So the ethics committee approval is a must. Then only the ethics committee can function as an ethics committee, and every protocol, every study has to have an approval from the ethics committee. When we are talking of the ethics committee, to maintain the balance, to maintain the safety of the subject, the main job of the ethics committee is to see that the safety and the well-being of the participants in the clinical trial is well protected. So there is a guideline by the regulatory authorities in which at least these members should be present in the ethics committee, and that is layperson, woman member, legal experts, independent member, medical doctor, scientific doctor, and one person as a non-scientific area. So all these members have to be present in the ethics committee to function as an ethics committee. Now, when we are talking of these clinical trials, the clinical trials are, as I was mentioning, is usually done in the patients, and it can be either phase one, phase two, phase three, or phase four studies. Phase one is done in healthy subjects and mainly for looking into the safety of the molecule. And phase two is essentially the proof of concept study or a proof of principle study. Phase 3 is carried out in a larger number of patient populations so that one can understand what is the safety and the efficacy of the molecule. And after the phase 3 study are completed, one files an NDA, that is a new drug application, for getting the marketing authorization for a particular molecule. And once the approval is obtained from the regulatory authority to market the product, usually the regulatory authorities, to gain more confidence on the safety of the product, they ask for the phase 4 clinical trials or the post marketing studies. So all the clinical trials have to be carried out for every molecule as such, and it has to be oversighted by the ethics committee as well as the sponsors who are conducting the study. And the clinical trial approval which is obtained from the regulatory authority is valid for 2 years, and certain time, particularly in oncology cases, there is usually the post-trial access is recommended by the health authority. That means the study which is carried out by the sponsor and the study is over, but the patients are still keen to have the drugs because they have improved to a great extent. It's very safe, but the drug is not available in the market. So they request that they whether they would like to have the additional quantity of the drugs, and then with the help of the investigator approval from the HIS committee and from the regulatory authority, the post-trial access can be obtained by the patients. This chart shows the how the once you submit the documents in the regulatory authorities office, and then what happens is that you make an application. Then it takes about 1.5 to 2 months for them to go through the documents, and then once all the documents are as per the checklist, it will be put up in the SEC meeting. When I say SEC, that is subject expert committee meeting, where you need to present the protocol and defend the protocol, and there will be experts in that particular therapeutic area. They can ask you many questions, and if they are satisfied, one gets an approval for conducting the study. But if they have some comments and they want you to improve the protocol, you have to improve the protocol and then come back to make a presentation again. And after they are satisfied with the particularly with the methodology, with the protocol, the safety, the efficacy expected, then one gets the approval to conduct the clinical trials, and that takes about at least about minimum 3 months, going up to maybe 4 to 5 months, depending upon the kind of the document that one has submitted. And this clinical trial application is made in City 04, and they give approval in City 06. And as I mentioned, it takes roughly about 90 working days, but 130 calendar days. And every clinical trial which is carried out has to have a registry. That means it has to be registered in CTRI, that is Clinical Trial Registry of India, so that people can come to know that there is a particular trial going on, and if they wish to participate, they can write to the sponsor or to the CRO conducting the study. And when the regulatory authority grants you the permission to conduct the study, they would like to receive an update of the enrollment of the patients in that particular protocol. So you have to submit the update report every 3 months and the status report every 6 months. And if once the study is terminated, either as in the routine factor or because of certain reasons, the early termination of the study, one needs to inform the regulatory authority within 30 days of termination of the study. Now, the other studies are bioequivalent or the bioavailability study. Invariably, this is carried out in the healthy subjects, and this is the studies which are mainly carried out for comparing the generic product with the reference product available with in the market of the innovator. And this is the area where one has to demonstrate the pharmacokinetics which are equivalent to that of the reference product and carried out as a within subject or a crossover study or a parallel study, and it has to fall into 80 to 120 geometric ratio, or with the with CI as that of between 80 to 120%. So it has to fall into that category. And the BAV process, the when you apply, you need to pay the fees of 2 lakh rupees, and then you may need to get certain the originator product from outside, and for that you need to obtain a test license, and the test license cost about 5,000 rupees or so. And one thing you must remember that now all the submissions since about 4 to 5 years, it has to be submitted online. There is no need to make any physical file submission into the regulatory authorities as such. So it makes the life much more easier. You can sit in your office, submit all the documents instead of going to Delhi. And that remains also a very highly confidential data which does not get leaked out. So it's all online submission so far as the Indian regulatory authorities are concerned. All these BE studies are carried out at the bioequivalent study centers, and our organization is one of the center where the bioequivalent studies can be carried out. We have about 540 beds facility in Ahmedabad, and if you see, there are west zone and the south zone are the main two zones where these centers are located. While the north and the east, there are very minimal numbers. So the majority are located in the west zone and the south zone as such. And all these BABE centers also needs to have a registration with the regulatory authorities as such, and the validity is 5 years. And every 5 years, one needs to re-register the BABE study center. If it is not registered, one cannot carry out any bioequivalent studies in that at the site. One of the important things that the DCGI or the CDSCO looks into is the serious adverse events that is part of the pharmacovigilance, whether it is in these clinical trials or even in the bioequivalent studies. And there are certain guidelines laid down for the pharmacovigilance activities, the reporting to the regulatory authority, reporting to ethics committee, who has given the approval to conduct the study. And then this, as per the kind of the serious adverse event, one has to either provide the compensation, or in case of any death taking place in clinical trial, the relative, the next to kin, uh, needs to be compensated. And there are guidelines for it. There is a formula which is set up by the regulatory authorities and the ethics committee, and accordingly one needs to make a payment to the either to the subject if there is a physical disability or a loss of job for maybe a few days. So you need to compensate the subjects for the loss of job of few days, and also provide the free medical treatment for the treatment of the serious adverse event. So this is one of the major factor that the regulatory authorities keep a very close watch. And if you do not follow these guidelines, there could be serious consequences when they come for inspection. Also, now let us see something about the manufacturing. Now, when we are doing a trial, there has to have a manufacturing of the formulation to conduct the clinical trial. So the manufacturing is of two types. One is of the test or also for the clinical trials, and the other one, the manufacturing is for the marketing of the product. So when we are doing the manufacturing for the clinical trials or the bioequivalent studies or for the test and analysis, these when they are manufactured, it has to be a GMP manufacturing facility, and the approval has to come from the zonal office of CDSCO, that is DCGI. And this drug is only for the clinical trials and for the test and analysis, and not for the marketing purpose. And this manufacturing should be as per the GMP standard that has been laid down by the regulatory authorities. And the conditions is, as I mentioned just now, it is for BABE studies, clinical trials, not for sale, not for marketing, and one has to manufacture in small quantities because it is essentially for the clinical trials and not for the marketing purpose. But whatever is manufactured, it has to be by the GMP manufacturing unit, and one needs to maintain all the records because the regulatory authorities can come down and inspect at any time. And if your documents are not proper, there could be again serious consequences as such. Again here, when the new drug is for the sale, or for the earlier one was for the clinical trial, this is for the new drug which is coming for the sale or for the distribution. Again, it has to have the GMP manufacturing unit, and it has to have an approval from the regulatory authorities, from the CDSCO, as well as the local Food and Drug Administration, FDA, of a particular state has to have has to grant the permission to conduct this to manufacture for sale and marketing purpose as such. And and one has to apply with the all the data, that is CMC data, the preclinical and the clinical data, the bioequivalent study reports, and also what is the risk and the benefit to the patients when the product is coming in the market. So these all data needs to be submitted before getting the manufacturing permission for the sales and distribution of a particular product as such. There is post-operative required is again a pharmacovigilance. I mentioned earlier about the serious adverse events, and this is very important because one has to know when the product comes in the market what kind of adverse events are observed. Because once you put the product in the market, the large patient population is consuming the product. When you are doing a clinical trial, there may be 3,000 or 5,000 patients participating in the trial. But when it comes in the market, there are millions of patients who will take the drug, and the incidence of the very low incidence of the serious adverse event can only come out when there are millions of patients are taking the drug. And the pharmacovigilance, there is also called, which the the manufacturing company has to submit the regularly the safety update report, that is called the PSUR, called periodic safety update reports. And one is to mention about the different kinds of adverse events which are observed, and one has to submit every 6 months for 2 years, and then every year for another 2 years, and then every 5 years later on. So PSUR is very important after the product comes in the market. And there are certain aspects which are considered as the as you if you remember earlier, I said the definition of the new drug is the one which is newly in the market, and also the drug which is in the market for more than 4 years becomes an old product. So then in such cases only the bioequivalence study is required before launching the product as such. There is you need to have the license to manufacture the product, but at the same time you need to have a separate license for ayurvedic product, allopathic product, unani products, siddha products, cosmetics products, biologicals, and vaccine products. So you cannot manufacture in one manufacturing unit everything. You need to have separate licenses for the different kinds of the products available in the market. There is also a provision by the regulatory authorities for pre-submission meeting and the post-submission. That means before you submit an IND, or before even you submit the marketing authorization, for marketing authorization, you discuss the what your plans are with the regulatory authority. They can guide you. And also certain time, the after the drug is in the market, after the documents are submitted, if you want to do any discussion, there is a provision for it. For the pre-submission there is a fees for it, which is about 500,000 rupees, but for post-submission it is about 50,000 rupees. And they provide you with a guidance about how to go about with your molecule as such. And there is also, you will remember what happened at the time of corona. COVID vaccine was available, and that is an emergency use authorization. Normally any product before it comes in the market, it takes at least 5 years before it comes in the market, sometimes even much more. But at the time of corona, because there was an emergency, there are certain tests, certain studies were waived off, and so that the drug can come in the market very fast. And that is what happens in such kind of situation. There is an unmet medical need, and there is an emergency use authorization is granted, and that product can come in the market much earlier. So far as India is concerned, it is mainly this life-threatening disease, also hepatitis, multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, H1N1, now of course H3N2, malaria, HIV, and the rare disease. We'll come to rare disease in a minute or so. And what happens is that the approval process is very fast. The approval process, if you remember earlier I showed, it takes about 120 to 150 days to get a permission to conduct the studies. Here they can give you permission within about 7 days time or so. And there are certain studies are waived off, only the essential studies needs to be carried out, and put the product in the market, and then keep on submitting the data to the regulatory authorities. So this is a very important part of the emergency use authorization, which has started from NDCT rule 2019. Now this is orphan drug. Orphan drug is the drugs which is being which will be used for the rare diseases. Now, in this rare diseases varies from country to country. So far as India is concerned, any drug or any disease, the prevalence of it is less than 5 lakhs patients in a community, in a country. Then that particular the product which is used to treat those diseases is called as an orphan drug. And again, orphan drug, the number of patients who will use will be very minimal. So there are certain tests also are waived off. The When we are doing a study, the every protocol one needs to have the payment to be made. Let's say for phase 1 it is 5 lakhs rupees, for bioequivalent studies it is 2 lakhs rupees, for phase 2 2 lakhs rupees, etc. So all these fees are waived by the regulatory authorities. Certain tests are waived, certain studies are waived, so that the drug becomes much more economical to produce, and also the less expense incurred at the time when the product comes in the market, and it becomes easily available for those patients who are suffering from the orphan diseases as such. So that is about the orphan drugs. So now you'll see that the most of this aspect, the clinical trials and the manufacturing, there is now a tremendous scope for the contract drug manufacturing and the contract research organizations. And the market for that in India is something like about $25 billion, which was in 23. And this is something which is very good for the contract manufacturing and also for the contract research organizations. And in India, the the market for contract research is about nearly $0.7 billion, and is expected to grow to $1.3 billion by year 2032. That's in next 5 years time or so. And this is a good market potential so far as the contract research is concerned. The worldwide, the contract research is something about more than $60 billion as such. So that is the kind of a potential that we are looking at. And India is becoming now the hub for the clinical trials, hub for the contract drug manufacturing, essentially because of the good infrastructure. So far as the clinical trial is concerned, there are good patient population is available for bioequivalent studies. Good number of healthy subjects are available who are participating in the study. There are medicos who are very well trained in, just like you have a GMP in clinical trials, it is GCP, that is good clinical practice. The doctors who are doing the clinical trial, they are all trained in the good clinical practice as such. And and also there are number of good institutions which are they can collaborate with the pharma companies, which like IIT, IIM, the NIPER, and other organizations, and which can collaborate in the activities of the pharma companies, and help in their R&D sections. And also the universities like Ahmedabad University can generate more and more highly educated and knowledgeable scientists who can help in the contract research and contract drug manufacturing organizations, and also they can start their own R&D centers or the manufacturing units. So in conclusion, the pharma plays a very major role so far as India is concerned. Not only the consumption within India, but also for the export, as much as about $20 billion export that is taking place from India. Bioeconomic studies plays a very major role for the launch of generic products in any country, and it helps in availability of the more economical products for the benefit of the patients. And the regulatory scenario currently in India is very conducive to promote clinical research and the pharma marketing as such. And there are reliable, compliant, quality conscious CROs available in the countries. And that is why the India is coming up as a good hub for the clinical trials, and also for CDMO and the contract research organization so far as pharma and the biotech products are concerned. These are the references. Well, thank you very much for your patient hearing. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you, madam.
Uh, Shwini ma'am, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Thank you so much, Professor Mathak, for that very insightful and deeply informative session. Your experience today and the clarity with which you enlightened us on the regulatory and the clinical trial landscape in India have certainly helped demystify a very complex but vital area of pharmaceutical development. I'd like to start the questions with a couple of questions that I had in mind. Dr. Mathak, India is no longer seen as just a generics hub, but increasingly as a partner in global innovation. So, which brings me to my first question. How do you think India's regulatory ecosystem has evolved and is still evolving in some sense to support complex generics, biosimilars, and innovative therapies alongside BABE and the traditional clinical trials?
I think a very good question. I think the scenario earlier days was not so good compared to what it is now. The reason being that there are more and more BE centers that have opened up. Second is the infrastructure availability in the country have improved to a great extent. Availability of the highly qualified, knowledgeable scientists who can conduct the studies and also help in conducting the studies. And most important aspect is the IT infrastructure. And most of the organization, including ours, we hardly use any papers. It's all electronic data. And the the when we do the any studies, we do all electronic data capture. And so the advantage is that you can save at least about 6 to 9 months when you are conducting the clinical trial. Another thing is in the regulatory side, NDCT rule when it came in 2019, we all sat down for nearly about 2 to 3 months every weekend in Delhi, and we were trying to see that things happen in such a way that it is more as good as in the other regulated markets like US FDA, European authorities, or British authorities. And it has worked very well. Also recently, about 3 months ago, there is now new draft guidelines have been published on biosimilar products. And biosimilars are playing a very major role now. And the now the guidelines are at par with USFDA or EMEA guidelines, and it has helped in waiving off the preclinical studies, including toxicology study in animals. And this has become so good that there are more and more companies from abroad. They want to conduct the studies in India so far as biosimilars are concerned, because it can save time by at least a year or two, and also at least few $1 million can be saved before launching the product. So it is evolving to a great extent. There is also a subject expert committee, and this committee meets every month for every therapeutic area, providing the wisdom and guidance about how to go about in conducting the studies. So, and also the ethics committee is playing a very major role. Earlier days, the ethics committees, though they were there, but they had not much of responsibility. Now every ethics committee has a lot of responsibility. When they approve a particular protocol, they have to monitor the study. They have to see there is any serious adverse event. They have to guide about the compensation to be paid. So all these activities that has created a good confidence in the minds of the pharma companies abroad and also in India, the large pharma companies, and that is how they want to conduct more and more studies in India.
Yes, I think that definitely is, very, very encouraging and much needed. So my next question is sort of a continuation of the last one is, regarding the rise of cell and gene therapies, mRNA-based treatments, and other advanced modalities that are reshaping the global pharmaceutical landscape and challenging regulators worldwide as well. So, for example, CAR T therapies are showing transformative potential in oncology. CRISPR-based approaches are being used for, treatment of rare genetic disorders. This rapid development and the emergency authorization of mRNA vaccines during COVID-19 is another example that, sort of further highlighted both the promise and the regulatory complexities of such innovations. Now, these breakthroughs are not only scientifically advanced, but also present unique challenges for safety evaluation, long-term monitoring, manufacturing scalability, which the regulators across the world are grappling with. So, how prepared do you think that India's regulatory framework is to evaluate such kind of new modalities, and what steps are being taken to build our capacity in this area?
The so far as CAR T cells, gene therapy, vaccines for oncology, or even vaccines for any other disease, the so far as vaccines are concerned, India is very well prepared. So far as gene therapy, CAR T cell therapy is concerned, there are separate guidelines now for gene therapy and also for CAR T cell therapy. There are Indian companies who have even launched CAR T cell therapy in the country, and there are institutions like Tata Memorial Hospital, or there is an oncology hospital in Goraj near Baroda. They have a GMP even facility for CAR T cell therapy as such. So it is now coming up very well in India also. And there are also companies who do stem cell therapy, and they are also doing extremely well. And this is, of course, certainly a different kind of treatment than people who are used to the small molecules or the other monoclonal antibodies.
Cool. Uh, Dr. Martin, may I request you to stop sharing?
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think, thank you again so much for that detailed response. And I'd like to now open the floor for a quick round of question and answers. And we request that, you please put your questions in the chat board, or please raise your hands. And our team, the GEMBA team will, I request them to facilitate this.
Yes, so we have, Professor, we have a question for you in the chat. How can firms choose between NDCT and SUGAM pathways to fast track trial approvals?
uh, S- Sugam portal, as you know, is uh, the site where one needs to submit all the documents, and there is a checklist available there. You need to follow the checklist properly and submit the documents. And so Sugam portal accepts the data on their website, on their platform. While NDCT rule is the rules which are made for, let's say, you want to conduct a preclinical studies or you want to do phase one study. So for conducting phase one study, what are the minimal documents which are required? What kind of preclinical studies are required? What kind of data is to be generated? Maybe in vitro study, in vivo studies, the toxicology studies, safety pharmacology study. So all these are the pre-requirement for conducting the phase one study, and that will be mentioned in the NDCT rules, and that will be also in the checklist of the Sugam portal. So it is, I would say, both are coordinating with each other, and but you need to submit all the required documents. Unless and until you submit all the data, the you may not get the permission to conduct the study. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor.
Got you.
Is there
Uh, any other questions? Yeah, there's one more. How prepared do you think India's regulatory framework is to evaluate these new modalities, and what steps are being taken to build capacity in these areas?
The Now, if you see earlier days, the preclinical studies were hardly carried out in India. Now there are many preclinical CROs in the country who can help in generating the data, which is as per the GLP standard. Also, there are IT infrastructure which is available in the country, which can take good kind of the they can give you a help. I'll give you an example. There is now even the artificial intelligence and machine learning very important so far as the clinical trials are concerned. Now, if we earlier days we were before the artificial intelligence and the IT structure came into picture, we used to do many bioequivalent studies. We used to do studies for renal impaired subjects, studies for hepatic impaired subjects, which will take maybe a year or two to complete with at least $1 million expenses. Now there are softwares with the artificial intelligence called PBPK modeling, and that is if you submit the data as per the PBPK modeling into that particular software, it will give you an idea about whether the study will pass or fail. It will also give you an idea about how will it behave, a molecule will behave if the patients are renal impaired patients or even hepatic impaired patients, what kind of dosage changes you have to make, whether increase the dose, decrease the dose, also the drug-drug interaction studies. So you can save a lot of time. And nowadays, all this data without conducting the study is even acceptable by the regulatory authorities. So you save time and money both, and the drug can come in the market at a much faster speed and at a lower expenses. So this is something which is very important now.
Thank you, Professor. I have another question. So, post-approval monitoring is becoming more data-driven with regulators worldwide emphasizing real-world data and evidence. Now, how do you think India is integrating real-world evidence into its regulatory decision-making, particularly for generics, biosimilars, and post-market surveillance?
Right. So far as the post-market surveillance is concerned, one needs to submit the PSUR as I was mentioning, so that they know exactly how the drug is behaving in the market in the larger patient population. And also, let's say when you are doing a clinical trial, it is a very regulated trial. You if you're doing a study in diabetes, let's say you want only patients suffering from diabetes, you don't want patients with hypercholesterolemia or patient hypertension, all that you don't want. But when the product comes in the market, they the patient can have not only diabetes but also hypertension, also hypercholesterolemia. We may be also having some peptic ulcer. So then there are different drugs also patients are taking, so it is a different metabolism. So in such cases, there may be chances of the other kind of serious adverse events which can take place. And that is why the PSUR is very important to submit in a pharmacovigilance side. That is so far as the clinical side is concerned. But so far as the manufacturing is concerned, there may be certain time, let's say that tablets have put in the market, and then over a period of time it starts disintegrating, or there are cracks are formed, or it starts melting or something like that, or the liquid, if it is there, the drug starts crystallizing into the solution. So all that kind of activity also one is to keep a check on it, and if there is anything like that is happening, they have to withdraw the product from the market and make the new batches or change the manufacturing process. So all this becomes a post approval kind of the observation, inspections, and take the necessary action according to it. And also you must have heard of products like Rofecoxib, Celecoxib, which are the NSAIDs, and they came in the market. And then after a few years, there was a publication in the Lancet journal, which said that those patients who had cardiac cardiac disease, they suffered much more, and many of them died when they were on Celecoxib or Rofecoxib. And that made changes in the initially into their package insert, the label claim, and ultimately they had to discontinue the product from the market. So there are instances where the drugs are withdrawn from the market. You must be also seeing certain times there are when the drug is in the market in US, you will see that the XYZ company withdrew the product from the market because of the quality issue you know. So they have to withdraw it voluntarily and then remanufacture and then put it again in the market. So these all aspects are very important as such.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor. Um, I think we're towards the end of the session, so I'd like to ask one more question before we close. You talked about AI and machine learning, how they're increasingly being applied in clinical trial design, patient recruitment, and data analysis. And in January 2025, FDA released a draft guidance for industry and other interested parties on, the considerations of the use of AI to support regulatory frameworks for decision making and for drugs and biological products. So, do you see Indian regulators beginning to recognize or adopt frameworks for AI-driven tools in clinical trials, similar to those emerging in FDA and EMEA?
Yes, in fact, there are guidelines published by ICMR about the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning in clinical trials. And so they are fully aware of it, and they are even guiding the scientists about how to go about in conducting clinical trials and how to take the help of artificial intelligence and machine learning. What we also do is that in trying to organize the clinical trial, and I want to do, let's say, a study in CA breast, and I want to have ERPR positive male or female who can participate in this study, but I have no data that whether how many patients I will get. So there are companies now with the help of artificial intelligence that they will know exactly in which institute how many patients are there with this kind of disease, and then I will know exactly which institute I should focus in conducting the clinical trial. Also, if I have to have, let's say, certain number of patients as per the biostatistical calculation, whether I will get that many patients or not, because I may want 2,000 patients in a particular trial, but in the market or in the actual population, I may not get that many patients. So I will suffer ultimately. So I will exactly know what kind of patients, when will I get it, and from which institute I will get, what is their age. I will get their whole data that is available with them. So that helps a lot to a great extent in designing the protocol, also the feasibility aspect, and conducting the study. And also nowadays there is a remote monitoring. We don't have to visit the site to monitor the patients or the study as such. So that also helps to a very great extent. So I think on the whole, the IT infrastructure has helped to a very great extent in conducting the clinical trial and in saving the cost of conducting the study and putting the drug in the market at an earlier date.
Definitely. Um, Well, with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you once again, Dr. Mathak, for such an insightful session and so patiently answering all the questions that we've had, and as well as the audience. On behalf of Ahmedabad University and everyone present, I extend a heartfelt thanks to Professor Mathak for generously sharing his time and valuable perspectives with us once again. We deeply appreciate your presence and contribution, sir. I would also like to thank all the attendees for being part of this session. If you have any more questions about our session today or about the university, please connect with our admissions team on a one-on-one basis or schedule a call with them. All of us, on behalf of all of us here from the GEMBA team, I wish you a very wonderful evening and happy Navratri. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dr. Ghosh,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Mac, and thanks to
Thank you,
Ahmedabad
Professor.
University for giving me this opportunity. And thanks all the participants for your patient hearing and a very intelligent questions that were asked to me. I'm very happy to interact with you. Thank you and have a lovely weekend.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Right.
Professor.
Bye bye.
Bye.